On the surface they were just 4 cities: Derby, Luton, Coventry, Nottingham. Places stitched into the everyday fabric of Britain. Quiet commuter hubs. Rows of terrace homes, corner shops, Friday night pubs, football chants echoing down side streets. The kind of places that rarely made the evening news unless a council tax dispute or a local derby match boiled over. Ordinary. Forgettable. But under the skin of those unassuming postcodes, a machine was moving. Not loud. Not bloody. Not the cinematic chaos of gunshots, car chases, or gangland feuds. No, this was something else. Colder, smarter, almost corporate in its precision. An operation so vast, so disciplined, that it shifted £165 million worth of cocaine across Britain in just over 400 days. And yet, in all that time, there wasn't a single headline. At the center of it was not a crime boss in gold chains or a flashy sports car. It was a man most neighbors would have walked past without a second glance. Paldip Mahngar. Middle-aged. Lived in a modest terrace house in Derby. He didn't flaunt wealth, didn't swagger, didn't play the role people expect of a kingpin. He was invisible, and that was precisely his power. Mahngar's genius wasn't in reinventing the drug trade, it was in disguising it. He built his empire like a company. There were imports, the raw material flowing in. Logistics, ensuring it moved through the country without a ripple. Finance, keeping the accounts in balance while money was washed and redistributed. Storage, the safe houses tucked away in quiet suburbs where cocaine bricks sat undisturbed. And couriers, the lifeblood of the operation, driving up and down motorways, carrying consignments that could ruin or reward in equal measure. Each role was clearly defined, each cog in the machine turning without friction. This wasn't the chaos of street dealers fighting over corners. This was management, structure, discipline. And Mahngar? He didn't need to raise his voice or wave a weapon. His power was silence. From his terrace home, he issued instructions that stretched across counties. He dealt in codes, in quiet exchanges, in phone calls that lasted seconds but carried the weight of hundreds of thousands of pounds. His lieutenants never had to guess what their role was. Everyone knew their part and everyone knew what was at stake. In Coventry, a man received a delivery. He didn't ask questions. In Nottingham, another man stored a package in a garage, the smell masked with everyday clutter. In Luton, a courier kept his eyes fixed on the road, knowing the wrong glance in the wrong mirror could bring the empire down. The scale was staggering. One shipment alone could be worth millions. Day after day, week after week, consignments flowed in and out like clockwork. By the time investigators eventually pieced it together, the numbers defied belief. Over 200 kilograms of cocaine, valued at £165 million, passed through the network in little more than a year. And yet, in those 400 days, the streets stayed quiet. No gang wars. No bodies in alleyways. No sudden splashes in the papers. To the public, nothing seemed amiss. But silence is deceptive. Behind every ounce, every kilogram, there was misery waiting downstream. Addiction tearing families apart, violence breaking out further down the chain, lives wrecked in places far removed from the neat terrace houses of Derby. Mahngar understood this, but he didn't care. For him, it wasn't about chaos or blood. It was about efficiency. About profit. It's a chilling truth. The most dangerous empires are the ones you never see. And Mahngar's was exactly that. A silent empire, moving under the noses of police, politicians, and the very communities whose pavements carried its couriers. A system so tight, so careful that for over a year it thrived untouched. No leaks. No headlines. Just steady, calculated growth. But in every empire, silence only lasts so long. Because while the streets of Derby and Coventry stayed quiet, someone was watching. Messages were being intercepted. Patterns noticed. The machine that had moved for so long without resistance was about to face the one force it could never fully control: surveillance. The trap wasn't sprung yet. But the first cracks in Mahngar's empire were forming. And soon the silence would be broken. On the surface, it looked nothing like the kind of criminal network you'd expect to find in Britain. There were no balaclavas. No shootouts in alleys. No glossy drug lords flashing gold chains in nightclubs. Instead, the empire Paldip Mahngar had built was run with the cold precision of a corporate boardroom. Every moving part had its function. Every person had their place. And like the best businesses, it thrived not by being noticed but by staying invisible. At the very top sat Mahngar, the so-called CEO of this silent empire. From his modest terrace house, he orchestrated one of the most lucrative drug pipelines in the country. He wasn't a man who wanted the spotlight. His neighbors thought of him as quiet, reserved. If you passed him in the street, you'd have no reason to look twice. But behind closed doors, he was running an organization capable of moving hundreds of kilos of cocaine with almost mechanical efficiency. His second in command was Jaswant Kajla, the logistics mastermind. Kajla wasn't a foot soldier. He wasn't on the streets handling wraps of powder. His role was more strategic, more cerebral. He made sure that every shipment, every delivery, every parcel of cocaine was accounted for. He worked like a freight manager at a shipping firm, calculating routes, delivery times, and storage points. Trucks, taxis, and even ordinary family cars became silent cogs in his operation. Then came the numbers men, Manraj Johal and Nimrat Bahia. In the underworld, most empires fall apart because of money. Dirty cash leaves a trail. Too much spending raises eyebrows. Johal and Bahia ensured that never happened. They didn't just count money, they laundered it, they balanced it, they turned street sales into figures that looked almost legitimate. To the outside world, they might have seemed like accountants or mid-level office clerks. But in reality, they were the reason Mahngar's £400,000 a day business didn't collapse under the weight of its own success. At the operational core sat Manveer Singh, the warehouse keeper. His job was as vital as it was dangerous. Singh oversaw the storage facilities where kilos of cocaine were hidden, repackaged, and redistributed. Warehouses disguised as small businesses, lockups tucked away in quiet neighborhoods. These were the hidden vaults of the empire. Singh made sure the product was always ready for movement, never sitting long enough in one place to attract suspicion. But no empire runs without movement. And for that, Mahngar turned to an unlikely group of couriers, taxi drivers. Basharat and Bernera Iqbal, along with Joseph Davidson, became the lifeline of the operation. Their cars, ordinary black cabs and family vehicles, were the perfect cover. After all, who would suspect a taxi weaving through traffic with passengers, boot space filled with luggage, or a few unmarked bags? To police or passers-by, it looked like the most normal thing in the world. But beneath the everyday journeys were hundreds of kilos of Class A drugs being shuffled across city lines. At the end of the chain were the buyers, the ones who took the cocaine and pushed it deeper into communities. One of the most prominent was Michael Karim, based in Nottingham. Unlike Mahngar, Karim embraced a flashier lifestyle. Luxury cars, designer clothes, the kind of image that suggested success but never quite explained where the money came from. To his followers, he was living proof that fast cash could buy fast dreams. But in reality, he was just another cog, a customer, albeit an important one in Mahngar's sprawling operation. What set this network apart wasn't just its scale. Though £165 million worth of cocaine in just 400 days is almost unimaginable, it was the discipline. No one stepped outside their role. No one courted unnecessary violence. While other gangs tore themselves apart with turf wars, Mahngar's men operated with the restraint of professionals. They used coded language, their conversations sounding innocuous to anyone listening in. They bundled cash tightly, moving it with the same care and precision as the drugs themselves. Violence, they understood, was messy. Violence brought headlines. And headlines were the last thing they wanted. It was, in many ways, the perfect system. Like any successful business, it had importers, logisticians, accountants, warehouse staff, couriers, and buyers. Only here, the product wasn't legal. It wasn't taxed, regulated, or documented. Yet the machinery turned smoothly. £400,000 a day in cocaine moved silently across Derby, Luton, Coventry, and Nottingham. No stock exchange, no quarterly reports. Just an empire that ran like clockwork, invisible to most, devastating to many. And yet, even the most disciplined machines leave marks. A fingerprint on a package. A stray text message. A movement tracked one too many times. For now, Mahngar's network looked untouchable, invisible. But history shows us that every empire, no matter how silent, eventually makes a noise loud enough to be heard. For years, the Mahngar network thrived under a cloak of invisibility. They didn't spray bullets across streets or light up nightclubs with designer excess. Instead, they moved like shadows, their voices rarely raised, their movements calculated, their empire tucked neatly into the folds of ordinary British life. And the secret that allowed them to run one of the UK's largest cocaine pipelines? EncroChat. To the untrained eye, these phones looked like any other sleek black device. No logos, no apps, just a screen and a promise. But to those in the underworld, EncroChat was a fortress. It offered encrypted messaging that supposedly couldn't be hacked, a panic wipe button to erase everything instantly, and servers routed through hidden international networks. To criminals, it was marketed as untouchable. To Mahngar and his associates, it was oxygen, the very lifeline that kept their empire breathing. Inside those phones, their arrogance lived in plain sight. They weren't cautious. They weren't cryptic. They believed the fortress was impenetrable. Photos of kilo blocks of cocaine, spreadsheets detailing movements, lists of addresses, even casual discussions of money counting. All of it sat on EncroChat, exchanged as if they were planning a weekend barbecue. For Mahngar's crew, it wasn't paranoia that kept them safe. It was blind faith. But in 2020, that faith cracked. Unbeknownst to the Mahngar network, European investigators had been working in silence. For months, law enforcement agencies in France and the Netherlands had chipped away at EncroChat's defenses, like safecrackers working on the most stubborn lock in the world. And then, a breakthrough. The system was compromised. Every message, every photo, every calculation that had once been invisible, was suddenly visible. The operation was given a name, Operation Venetic. It was the digital equivalent of pulling back a curtain. Investigators could now sit quietly and watch, as if they were invisible guests in the room, listening to every whispered detail. The gang thought they were still safe, still invisible, still above the law. But their empire was already crumbling from within. In Derby, a raid uncovered a holdall with 7 kilos of cocaine tucked inside. Each brick meticulously wrapped, its street value stretching into millions. For police, it wasn't just a seizure. It was proof. The EncroChat messages weren't fantasies. They were maps. In London, officers stumbled upon £530,000 in cash, bundled and hidden away like forgotten treasure. Plastic wrapped, labeled, stacked. The physical residue of an empire that thought money could be buried deeper than its crimes. Back in Derby, another discovery silenced even the most hardened detectives. £1.4 million in cash, concealed in a property linked to the network. The kind of money that didn't just whisper wealth, it screamed scale. This wasn't small-time street dealing. This was corporate-level trafficking, run with the precision of accountants and the reach of international logistics firms. Piece by piece, the house of cards collapsed. Each raid sparked another lead. Each EncroChat message opened a new door. The dominoes fell across the map, from Derby to Coventry, Nottingham to Luton. Couriers once trusted with anonymity were now names on charge sheets. Addresses once thought safe houses were reduced to police exhibits. And the most chilling part? None of them even knew it was happening. For months, the gang continued to communicate on EncroChat, blissfully unaware that their digital fortress had already been breached. They sent photos, tracked money, calculated profits. Meanwhile, detectives were silently building a case, one message at a time. By the time the hammer came down, the scale was undeniable. Over £165 million in cocaine moved in just 400 days. Cash flooding into warehouses, couriers ferrying parcels across cities, accountants tracking the empire like a multinational corporation. And every detail of it, every whispered deal, every coded promise, every careless brag, was sitting on servers the police now owned. EncroChat was supposed to be their greatest shield. Instead, it became the rope that tightened around their empire. The invisible had finally become visible. By the time the courtroom doors swung open in Derby Crown Court, the scale of what the police had uncovered was almost impossible to process. This wasn't a handful of men selling drugs on a corner. This was an empire. And on that day in 2022, the quiet men who had built it, accountants, taxi drivers, fathers, sons, were marched into the dock to face the reality of their invisible empire collapsing around them. The numbers spoke louder than any testimony. 18 defendants. Sentences adding up to 167 years in total. It wasn't just one ringleader taking the fall. The Crown had dismantled every level of the operation, from the couriers carrying kilos in car boots to the men who had balanced the books like corporate accountants. At the center of it all was Paldip Mahngar, the so-called CEO of this underground business. He was a man who avoided flashiness, who lived in a modest terrace, who didn't brag or wave money around. Yet prosecutors laid out the truth. Mahngar had been at the top of a supply chain that pumped £165 million worth of cocaine across the Midlands in just over a year. His sentence reflected his power, 18 years and 3 months behind bars. Sitting just beneath him in the hierarchy was Jaswant Kajla, the logistics mastermind. He was the one who coordinated shipments, who made sure the product arrived, was weighed, cut, bagged, and moved without a hitch. His meticulous planning, prosecutors argued, made the entire enterprise possible. His reward? A lengthy prison sentence to match the precision of his crimes. Then came Manraj Johal and Nimrat Bahia, the financial brains of the outfit. They weren't the ones carrying packages through the night, but their fingerprints were everywhere. On the coded ledgers, the cash bundles, the accounts that tracked millions flowing in and out. Without them, the cocaine was just powder. With them, it became money, and lots of it. Their sentences were long, a reflection of how vital their white-collar roles were in a very dirty business. Manveer Singh, the warehouse keeper, didn't escape either. He was the man who made sure the stock was safe, the hidden kilos protected behind unremarkable doors in Derby. For every shipment moved, for every bundle stored, Singh was there, playing his part in keeping the conveyor belt moving. The judge handed him years behind bars too, a reminder that in a machine this vast, every cog was accountable. And then there were the couriers, men and women who, on the surface, looked like everyday workers. Taxi drivers like Basharat and Bernera Iqbal, trusted because their cars blended into the night. Joseph Davidson, another courier, ferrying packages that looked like luggage but were worth more than houses. Their sentences were shorter than the leaders, but still devastating. Years taken away for choosing fast cash over honest miles. Even the buyers, like Michael Kareem, who paraded his taste for luxury goods in Nottingham, couldn't hide behind the excuse of being small-time players. They were the demand that kept the supply alive. Without them, there would be no empire. And so, the gavel came down hard. The prosecutor's words lingered in the courtroom. This was not street dealing. This was industrial-scale trafficking, designed with the cold efficiency of a corporation. It was true. What had made this empire unique wasn't violence. No turf wars. No guns flashing in back alleys. It was discipline. Spreadsheets. Taxi routes mapped like delivery schedules. Bundles of cash counted like invoices. In the end, what brought them down wasn't a gun battle or a police chase. It was their own arrogance, their belief that encrypted words were invisible. The irony was brutal. The EncroChat phones, their secret weapon, had become their downfall. Every coded message, every photograph of a kilo wrapped in tape, every ledger of cash, all of it sat in front of the jury, undeniable. Their empire had been silent, invisible, untouchable. Until the moment it wasn't. And so, the courtrooms echoed with the sound of futures closing. Families in tears. Defendants staring at the floor. The invisible empire had been exposed, not with bullets, but with data. Not with violence, but with evidence. The reflection was unavoidable. This wasn't a gangster film. It was real life. And in real life, sometimes the most dangerous empires don't announce themselves with blood in the streets. Sometimes they hide in plain sight, disguised as normal lives until the moment they collapse. The case of Paldip Mahngar and his associates was more than just another drug bust. It was a glimpse into the industrial side of organized crime, an empire that thrived not on chaos but on control. They thought they had built a business too invisible to ever be seen. But in the end, it was their very precision, their very arrogance that exposed them. If you found the story as striking as we did, the rise and fall of an empire that tried to operate like a corporation in the shadows, make sure to subscribe. Hit the bell icon so you never miss another deep dive into the hidden underworlds shaping life around us. Because sometimes the most dangerous stories aren't the loudest. They're the silent ones hiding right next door.